Parents, I want to begin by thanking you for bringing your kids on Sundays. I want to thank you, and I know that it's a sacrifice to get everybody up, dressed, fed out the door, and to church on time. I've got 2 teenagers who are pretty independent, and there are some Sundays when I struggle to get them here, but I want to thank you for your sacrifice, and I believe that as parents, we are going to reap a harvest from that sacrifice. So thank you, parents. And church, I want to thank you for making space for our students. And I'm not just talking about the rooms where they meet at to have class, but I'm talking about making space in our ministries and on this platform, because what we're saying to them is you belong here and you can grow here. And I am excited about this generation. When I look at the future, it can look very dark and hopeless. But when I see what I saw here this morning, I have hope for the future, and we are investing in it. So parents, keep up bringing them on Sundays. It is a joy for us to teach them. All right, kids, are y'all ready to help me teach this morning? Are y'all ready? Okay, during the month of October, we have been learning about 2 people in the Bible. What are their names? Joseph and Moses. We've been learning about their stories, and we've also learned a great new word that starts with the letter G. What's that word? Grit. Can we all say that out loud? Grit. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Grit. Let's say that one more time. 1, 2, 3. Grit. And we're defining grit as refusing to give up when things don't work out the way we thought they should. Can anybody relate to that? Now, I'm going to highlight a little bit about the story of Joseph. I'm not going to go through the whole story, but I do want to highlight some events in Joseph's life. And I have 5 volunteers who are coming up right here, and they're going to help me highlight that. So if you volunteer to help me on stage, if you'll come right over here and see Mr. Kevin. Who were the 5? Perfect. Oh. I think we have 1 extra. That's okay, we'll keep it. I'll work with it. In kids ministries, you just have to roll with it. You just roll with it, okay? All right, so let me have my first helper. I'm moving too much. I'm sorry. You got to move in kids ministry, so I apologize to the tech team. All right, so come over here. So when we start the story of Joseph, Joseph is in the safety of his father's home, and he is the favorite child, so much so that his father gives him a coat of many colors to let everyone know that he's the favorite. It even comes with a Rudolph nose. So here's Joseph, the favorite in Jacob's home. Now, Joseph has this special dream where he tells his brothers that they're going to be bowing down to him. And his brothers didn't like that. I wonder why. So who's my next helper? So they decide to put Joseph in a pit, and then they sell him off as a slave. So here's your basket, because this is Joseph as a slave, and he's going around Potiphar's house collecting all the toys the kids are leaving everywhere, and you're working for Potiphar's house, okay? So favorite child, brothers are jealous of him, they put him in a pit, and then they sell him, and he becomes a slave in Potiphar's house. Okay, who's my next helper? While in Potiphar's house, he gets promoted because he's doing a great job. So he becomes the employee of the month. Okay, can you hold this up here? Wait, no, up here. All right, this comes with the parking for your camel as well. Okay, so he's in the pit. Okay, he's a slave, he's working, but he does such a good job that he gets promoted in Potiphar's house. While he's serving in Potiphar's house and being faithful, Potiphar's wife accuses Joseph of doing something he did not do. And Joseph ends up in prison. I wanted to get some chains, Ella, but I didn't get chains. So I have a box of tissues because being in jail is a sad thing. So here's Joseph, and he sits in jail for 2 years for something he did not do. And who are my two last helpers? This is gonna work out perfect. Can y'all stand right next to each other? While he is in jail, the Pharaoh has a dream, and Joseph is called to interpret that dream. And because he's able to interpret that dream and let Pharaoh know, hey, you need to get ready because we're getting ready to see 7. This is exactly what I hoped had happened with that basket. While he's telling Pharaoh, we're getting ready to have 7 years of plenty, and we need to use that time to get ready for the following 7 years of lack, of famine that's coming. Because Joseph's able to interpret that dream, he is promoted. I think both of y'all, hold on. This is big enough. He is promoted to second in command over all of Egypt. Oh, yes, perfect. Listen. I kind of feel like my job is done. I was just put the cute kids up here and I'm done. So here's Joseph, favorite child, safety of mom and dad's house, betrayed, forgotten, sent to Egypt, a land far away without any loved ones. He's promoted, doing good. His plaque is on the wall and all the other servants are looking at him. He's accused of something he didn't do. He sits in jail for 2 years. And then in the end, he's promoted to second in command. I can see how Joseph made it through and did not have any problems here, or here. Life was good for Joseph, right? If we're sitting in any of these 3 spots, life is good for us. But I wonder how Joseph made it through, just you two, when he was in the pit. Did I lose should I switch? Let's switch. All right, thank you, sorry about that. I wonder how Joseph made it through when he was in the pit, serving as a slave, and when he was in prison, wrongly accused. I want you guys to look at the scripture that's getting ready to come up. Genesis 39, verse 2. This is when Joseph is bought by Potiphar to be a slave in his house. Listen to what it says. The Lord was with Joseph, so that he prospered and he lived in the house of his Egyptian master. The Lord was with Joseph. And then skipping down to verses 20 and 21. So Joseph's master took him and put him in prison, the place where the king's prisoners were confined. But while Joseph was there in prison, the Lord was with him. He showed him kindness and granted him favor in the eyes of the prison warden. That's how Joseph made it through. That's how he showed grit, and that's how he refused to give up, because the Lord was with him. Now, I want you guys to do me a favor, and you guys head right over there. Mr. Kevin's going to help you collect. Sometimes things just work out better than what you scripted it, and that's what I love about children's ministries. All right, parents, I want to talk to you for just a second.
Okay? Kids, you hang in here with me, but I want to talk to the parents for just a second because I love that the author of Genesis chose to place the words, the Lord was with Joseph. Not when Joseph is in the safety of his father's house being the favorite child, and not when Pharaoh puts Joseph in command of the entire kingdom, but the words, the Lord was with Joseph, are penned strategically when he is sitting in a pit, when he's being sold as a slave, and when he is in prison, because we don't need to be reminded that the Lord is with us when everything's going well. We need to be reminded that the Lord is with us when we're sitting in pits, when we're being sold as slave, when we're being betrayed, when we're being shamed, and when we're sitting in prison paying for something we didn't even do. That is good. Are any of us this morning sitting in a pit or in a prison wondering, how did this happen? How did I go from being the favorite to being in prison to being in a pit? God, do you even know that I'm here? You see, while Joseph was seeing prison walls, God was seeing a palace where Joseph would be made second in command in order to save Egypt from famine. And you may be looking at your prison walls this morning, but trust me that God sees something better. This morning, I want you to remember that the Lord is with you, and no weapon formed against you is going to prosper, because if God is intending the palace for you, I don't care if you spend 2 years in prison, you're going to end up in the palace because that is God's purpose for you. So if you're waiting right now in prison or in the pit, or you're serving as a slave, I want you to know that God sees something different. Trust him. Hang on tight and remember that the Lord is with you. And that's how we can go through the times in our lives when things don't work out the way we thought that they should. That's how we show grit, because he is with us. We've also learned about Moses, and we're all very familiar with that story. God asked Moses to go up against the most powerful ruler of his time, to tell Pharaoh to let the Israelites free from their enslavement. After the plagues on Egypt, Pharaoh finally decides to let Israel free. He lets them go. But he changes his mind, and he sends an army after them. And here's Moses and the Israelites, and they're standing before a great big sea in front of them. And they look back, and here comes Pharaoh's army coming to attack them. And they're standing right in between two impossibilities. And let me tell you something, they were terrified and they were frightened. Can any of us relate to standing in between two impossibilities? Financial crisis, just lost my job. A broken relationship, divorce. Inflation, I have no idea what the future holds. You get a call that your father-in-law has terminal cancer one day. And 3 days later, your dad says, "I'm sorry, baby, but the cancer's back." And you're standing in the middle, and you're looking at the sea in front of you, and you're looking at the army on the other side, and you're like, what am I going to do? I would probably do what the other Israelites were doing. I might as well go ahead and start digging my own grave, because there's no way I'm going to make it through this. This is too big. It's too great. It's too impossible. It's too much for me to handle. Listen to what Moses tells the people in Exodus 14:13. This is what he tells them. Do not be afraid. Stand firm, and you will see the deliverance the Lord will bring you today. The Egyptians you see today, you will never see again. The Lord will fight for you. You need only start making rafts. See if you can get on the water before they get to you. You need to go ahead and gather any weapons you have and get ready to fight. You need to go ahead and line up your strongest people up front. No. He tells them to stand still. That is so hard for us to grasp. Listen, I am a problem solver. When I am pushed against the wall, I am trying to come up with a solution. I am a problem solver. I made a great career out of solving problems and logistics. I would be like, listen, if we could just cut some trees down, we can make some rafts, we're going to come up with a solution. And this is what Moses tells them. Stand still. Don't do anything. I think God is telling some of us this morning, stand still. Do nothing. Stop trying to figure it out. Stop trying to come up with a solution based on the resources and the knowledge that you have. Stand still. No one there imagined that sea was going to split open. No one. Because God was showing them who he was and what he was capable of. And he was trying to tell the Israelites, I'm in control. And sure enough, the sea opened up. The entire Israelite nation made it through safely. They got to the other side. While the Egyptian army is making their way across that sea, the Lord moves again, moves the water, swallows them up, and not one of them made it through. And all the Israelites had to do was stand still. It can be so easy to be overcome with fear and want to give up when whatever we face seems impossible. But I believe Moses would tell us today, refuse to give up. Stand still, watch, and trust him because God is in control. He's in control of your situation, and God is very much aware of the impossibilities that you are facing. And I don't know what you are seeing today, but trust that God has a purpose for you. And your moment of defeat and fear can become a catalyst for God to show up and show everyone who he is. Joseph's life teaches us that the Lord is with us, and Moses' life teaches us that the Lord is in control. The God of Joseph and Moses was with them, and he was in control. And these men refused to give up when things did not work out the way they thought that they should. And because they refused to give up, we have their testimony today. And we can talk about the Lord being with us, and we can talk about the Lord being in control because Joseph and Moses did not give up. And I have a question for you, church. What is the testimony that is being worked out in our lives today that someone somewhere down the road is going to say, I'm not giving up because Kevin, I remember when Kevin was struggling and he didn't give up. He had faith in God. I want to ask you, what are you in the middle of and what are you watching? Do you trust that the Lord is with you? Do you trust that the Lord is in control? And do you trust that there is a testimony being birthed out of you to encourage someone else? Don't ever forget that he is with you and he is in control.
Just one generation later, after the Israelites stood before the Red Sea with the army in front of them and the sea behind them, and Moses stands with his arms held high and the waters part and they walk through on dry land, just one generation later, 40 years later, they were promised this promised land. And for 40 years, they wandered the desert, and they kept forgetting over and over again what God had done at the Red Sea. And they kept making a fool of themselves. But then one generation later, they find themselves standing at the brink of the promised land with nothing between them and their promise but the Jordan River. And so they're standing there at the Jordan River, and they're not necessarily panicked because there wasn't an army behind them. And there are probably a whole bunch of different ways that they could have gotten into the promised land. But this time, God tells Joshua, here's what I want you to do. And to make a long story short, he tells the priests to take up the Ark of the Covenant. And I want you to walk into the Jordan River. And when the priests who represent and carrying the Ark of the Covenant, representing the presence of God, stand in the Jordan River, then he will dry up the ground. And when he does that, you will walk through on dry land. Now here's what I wonder. I wonder if anybody had any doubt whatsoever that God couldn't do it. They had already seen it. But listen, it wasn't them that had seen it. It was their fathers who had seen it. And so based on the testimony of their fathers, they had no doubt that when the presence of God enters into the Jordan River, that the water's going to stop. I've seen him, I've heard him do it before. I've heard about the story of when they crossed the Red Sea. God had done it before. Surely he can do it again. And so when the priests put their feet in the water, the river stopped. And then they stood there. And while they stood there, the Israelites crossed into the promise on dry land. Here's what's interesting. What if Joshua would have gone up to the Jordan River and he'd have been like, and held up his staff and waited for the waters to part? It wouldn't have happened, because that's not what God said to do. He had no doubt that if he did what God said to do, I've seen him do it before. We can walk across on dry land. He can do it again, but it didn't do it the same way. He didn't do it the same way. So based on the testimony of what they had seen and heard God had done in the past, how many times do we try to do it the same way? How many times are we like, okay, God, you did this before, so in order to do that, I have to manipulate it and do it like this, this, and this. No, what is God saying to you? What is your promise? What is he saying for you to do? Obey, and God will take care of it. Not on your own power, not in your own strategy, not on you in any way, shape, or form, because it has nothing to do with our power. The presence of God was standing in the Jordan River, so the water stopped because God was with them. And so after they do that, I love this, Joshua chapter 4. When all the people had crossed the Jordan, the Lord said to Joshua, now choose 12 men, one from each tribe. Tell them, take 12 stones from the very place where the priests are standing in the middle of the Jordan, carry them out and pile them up in a place where you will camp at night. So Joshua called together the 12 men, and they had chosen one from each of the tribes of Israel. He told them, go into the middle of the Jordan in front of the ark of the Lord your God. Each of you must pick up one stone and carry it on your shoulder, 12 stones in all, one for each of the 12 tribes of Israel. We will use these stones to build a memorial. In the future, your children will ask you, what do these stones mean? And you will tell them, they remind us that the Jordan River stopped flowing when the Ark of the Covenant went across. These stones stand as a memorial among the people of Israel forever. Based on the testimony of their fathers, they obeyed and saw miracles happen. And then they were commanded to create a memorial so that everyone else who was going to come after them, so when their children asked, what does this mean? You can remind them about the miracles of God. Your children, our children, they have a promise. And you have been given promises. And you have seen God fulfill those promises. Our children need to hear the faithfulness of God. They need to hear the testimony of his people. They need to understand the faithfulness of the one who has made the promise and how he will be there. How you can trust him. No matter what's going on, he's gonna be there. We're gonna sing a song to close out our service. Every Foursquare church has to have, kind of in our bylaws, on the back of the sanctuary, without anybody cheating and turning around to look, because it's back there. We all of our Foursquare churches have a verse on our back of our sanctuary wall. I'll tell you, because you don't have a microphone. It says, Jesus Christ is the same yesterday, today, and forever.
Amen.
Don't ever forget it. He is the same God who walked his people across the Red Sea on dry land. He's the same God who walked his people across the Jordan River on dry land. In the presence of God, miracles can happen. The same God who did those things is the same God today. In the presence of God, miracles can happen. In the presence of God, he will fulfill his promises in our lives. What we have to do is listen to what he is saying to do and obey. And we have to do it the way he's asking us to do it, not the way that we think we should achieve his promise. And so this morning, while we are singing this song, Same God, I want us to enter into a time of worship and ministry, asking God, what is the promise that you have given me? And what are you asking me to do? And how can I share that faithfulness, my testimony, with my children, with our children? And so while we are singing this song, there are two piles of stones up here. And would you be so bold as to set an example for our children? Because you have a testimony. This rock will remind me of 6 years ago when I didn't have a job. I didn't have any income. We had been praying and trying to adopt for years. Can't look over there. Can't look right here. For years we had been trying to adopt. And suddenly, I lose my income. And wouldn't you know it, that's when God decides to bring a little girl into our lives. Besides the miraculous ways of how he provided in that season for us, there was a lady, and when we went to Alabama to pick up our little girl, we were gonna have to stay for 10 days or more or whatever, and we had no way of paying for any of that. We didn't even know her. She sent us with a blank check to cover anything we would need in those 10 days. It didn't make any sense. We had no way to finance what we were about to do. We were between the promise and the enemy and lies, and it didn't make sense. And in the midst of that, God was there. I have a testimony to share with my children of God's faithfulness. As we sing about the same God who did all of those things, will you come up, grab a stone, take it back with you, set an example for our children, because you have a testimony. And may it always remind you not only of what that testimony is, but there are children, there are people that need to hear your testimony about what God did in your life and how he will do it in their life. How he is faithful, how he is just, how he is true, how he is a God worth fearing, because he can do the impossible. Let's worship.